Hi, I'm Melissa Henriquez, and the purpose of my presentation is to take you through my analysis of one of Lazo Mahaly-Naj's famous paintings, Composition 18. But first, we will begin with a brief history of Mahaly-Naj and the influences in his life that directly impacted his work. Lajos Mahaly-Naj, born on July 20, 1895, was a Hungarian artist and professor. His importance in the 20th century is based on his ideologies related to the relationship between space, time, and light, and the interaction of man with those forces. An early influence of Mahaly's way of thinking was his time spent in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War II, where he sketched hundreds of drawings reflecting his experiences, which eventually led to his strong sense of social idealism. He believed art offered a way to reorder society and looked especially to technology to pave the way. His early paintings and drawings were figurative and tended towards expressionist painting. Shown here is a self-portrait of Mahaly created in the early 1920s. Soon after, Mahaly became strongly influenced by Russian constructism, which is how his art developed into abstract forms. Constructism art attempted to express a system of universal classic values through geometric forms that had no direct relation to the natural world. This brings us to Composition 18, completed in 1924, just one of his many abstract paintings. A pivotal point in Mahaly's career is when he was recruited to teach at the Bauhaus of Architecture, Art, and Design. It was here he helped move the school towards design and industrial integration. He also became proficient in various fields such as sculpture, photography, and industrial design. My first step in analyzing Composition 18 was to take a quadrant of the painting and replicate the colors I saw. Using pigmented gouache, I experimented with primary colors and black and white in order to reproduce my quadrant. The first step I took in recreating my quadrant was to experiment with mixing different shades of color until I reached the one I thought was the closest to my painting. Next, I had to tape down the area being painted in order to keep my outlines clean. And the last step was the painting, which was a little challenging because the gouache would dry quickly, causing an uneven color. After many layers of paint, I was able to complete my quadrant and really understand the tones and shades of each color and how it might relate to our next analysis of the painting. To the left is a list of swatches identifying the ratio of each color it took to create each section. In the second part of my assignment, I was asked to recreate Composition 18 in PowerPoint by creating an animation of shapes as I saw them in my quadrant and how they fit together in reference to the entire painting. Overall, I think the composition is organized with various strips of colors that are being reflected from the main light source in the upper right corner. There are three main primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, that shoot across the white canvas, creating the other various colors shown. I believe there is also a second light source coming from the lower right, creating a pinwheel effect that causes yellow reflecting onto the lighter yellow strip. As for the lower left corner, there is a dark blue object that seems to be a combination of all the primary colors, making it very dark. My quadrant in the lower left of the painting contains this very dark object, and it's clear that even though the yellow and red strips seem to pass over the shape, they might not entirely, due to the lighter colors that are shown. This area may only be reflected light. I believe in this highlighted location is a light source appearing above the colors, causing them to have a tint of color behind it. The shapes I see as most distant are the very light beige ones. Next is the primary yellow strip that moves behind the dark blue object, followed by the red that jets diagonally across the quadrant and over the dark blue object, creating a jagged maroon stripe. Following is the brown shaded shapes in the bottom right corner that are from the red stripe and mixed with the background blue. The last shapes are the lightest ones that seem to overlay the red, causing the maroon transparency, and the light blues in the lower right corner. The very last shape, right in the middle of the intersecting red and yellow, seems to be a reflective light that contains very little color. My third and final assignment in analyzing Composition 18 was to use the color theory and perspective I gained from my previous assignments to create a 3D model of the painting. By standing 8 feet from the middle of the painting, my quadrant is depicted as it looks in the painting. My first step in building this 3D model was to cut out the shapes of colored acetate in what I imagined was the correct size of them, 8 feet from the center of the painting. This was tricky and required a lot of trial and error. By using glue and other resources to hold up my shapes, I angled and assembled the shapes I saw in my quadrant in order to get the correct amount of light passing through the acetate colored filters, so I could effectively depict how my quadrant looks in the painting. After many changes of angles and use of various layers of transparency, I was able to effectively replicate my quadrant in reference to the entire painting. I learned a lot about the use of color, how angle plays a role in perspective, and most of all, what we see at first glance might not always be exactly what we think we see. A slight shift in perspective can alter an entire design as well as a mindset.